A hearty welcome back to all you toasters and moshers out there. I'm Charles, and this is Riffs and Spliffs. No, this is shit. Hi and welcome. You're all probably scratching your head after hearing me say, this is shit? Shit? What do you mean, Charles? What do you mean? Well, what I mean is, and let me break it down for you, break it down for ya. SHIT is an acronym that I myself decided to come up with that stands for Sativa, Hybrids, Indica, and Terpenes. So if you didn't guess from that little introduction about what this podcast episode is going to be teaching you, it's going to be a little education about what a sativa really is, a hybrid, indica, and what those most common terpenes that are found in our cannabis strains are. So coming... So y'all might be wondering what that was. So I actually record in my car. That's right, because the sound quality and the acoustics are superb. And by acoustics, I mean there is none, so it's the best for fucking recording. And what that sound you heard was, well, I was smoking weed and blowing it out the door here. And while I was doing that, a bug must have got in the, car somehow, and it flew on my screen as I was recording that specific section, and yeah, there you go. That was me violently whacking my laptop screen, which probably isn't the best thing to do considering I use this to record these. So anyway, so let's start with my personal favorite, the sativa. Sativa is a category of cannabis that grows tall and more slender, having narrow leaves, what they call finger-like, quote-unquote, usually 5. And these tall, slender plants are grown/found in mostly hot and dry climates with plenty of sun. Some examples of those strains being Acapulco Gold, which I do cover on the very official first episode that will be coming out shortly, and Durban Poison, which is usually a fan favorite. Some of the more noticeable effects from the sativa plant include energizing, very good at stimulating and keeping someone focused, and it really ups the game for creativity, and that's why I personally myself like to lean more towards indicas. Not indicas. Don't smoke weed, kids. So scent and taste profiles that are going to be commonly found in sativas include things like a floral, citrus, clean and clear, and sometimes cheesy. And now some people, because I have met people myself, when I say cheesy, they just look at me and don't really, they just scratch their heads. And cheese to me has always been a really hard, probably the hardest thing to describe or talk about when speaking about cannabis and strains specifically, but it's just, I remember my first cheese strain I had was, I moved to Denver, Colorado shortly for 2.5 months to be with my now significant other, who I have my son with, and we went to a dispensary out there and I found a strain called Cheesequake. And I said, Cheesequake? Like, I mean, I've heard of cheesy weed, but I guess I never really had it, especially because, back in Illinois at the time, still was not, legal, barely medicinal, I even think, at that point. So, it was whatever you could get on the street. And trying this cheesy weed, And I've noticed now, especially coming back to Illinois, and it being recreational, medicinal, and very streamlined and mainstream, you don't find a lot of cheese strains out here. I have had mac and cheese, and I've seen a couple others that I can't remember. I found Cheesequake once out here, so I had to grab a pre-roll. I could not let that opportunity slide away. And I suggest if you find that in your local dispensaries that you pick it up. Yeah, so sorry about that little rant there. But yeah, cheese is just very pungent. And very stinky. And that's really the only way I can describe it. And I know that really sounds like a lot of pretty much weed that you would describe, but just the cheeses have a funky, like, foot smell to them almost, if that makes sense. So try to imagine that, and that's pretty much almost any cheese strain, but I guarantee you're in for a good ride of a high. Final thing to mention about our good friend Sativa is that some noticeable medicinal uses for these plants can be helping treat anxiety, depression, migraine relief sometimes, where I find that if I smoke a certain strain that I'm hoping is going to help my headache, it'll sometimes make the headache turn into the migraine before it gets there, because I can kind of judge when they're going to be popping up as the day goes on if I'm going to get one. So be careful if you're using cannabis to treat your migraines, because it can be tricky. Continuing on down our shit list, we have the H in shit, which is a hybrid. And a hybrid is exactly what it sounds like. It's a cross between any given indica and or sativa strains. And depending on the lineage of the hybrid, it can lean, like I said, indica dominant. So kind of examples of that is Girl Scout cookies, which is parented by OG Kush and Durban Poison, or something like a sativa dominant, which would give you, for example, Super Silver Haze, which is a nice mix between Haze itself, Northern Lights number 5, and Skunk number 1. And now I don't know if I'm going to be saying this out of my own biased experience with buying cannabis, but I find that 50-50, like even 50-50 hybrids are really hard to come by, and I really technically in my own dispensary, and at some point if it's of interest to you guys, I can do a little rundown of what I call my dispensary. It's a lock safe that I have where I keep all my medicinal goodies stored. So, and I think technically that's the legal way that you're supposed to if you're a medical patient, especially if you have kids. So yeah, I could give you guys a little tour of that if that's something you're ever interested in. But yeah, I only got, I think, 2 full-on 50-50 hybrids, and that's this strain called White Wedding, and forgive me, for I have sinned for not remembering all the strains in my dispensary. Crucify me, O Lord and Savior, John Wayne Gacy. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, let's go. Next bit. Yeah, so ultimately, hybrids can have a very wide spectrum of what they can do for effects and medicinal uses depending on the lineage of that strain in itself. And that'll be something, like I mentioned, that we'll really delve into as we go further into the podcast and the episodes and I get into these strains for you guys. Now that we got the H out of the way of our shit list, we're going to move into the I, which, you guessed it, indica. So indica is a category of cannabis that grows short and bushy, unlike its sativa polar opposite. These plants have a high resilience to persisting weather conditions. Unlike sativa plants, their leaves are chubbier and include 7 of those finger-like leaves. A couple examples of an indica strain would be something like Northern Lights, which is a cross of just straight Afghani landrace and Thai landrace. And then cult favorite, and I've only had the wax form of this strain, but it every time guaranteed knocked me on my ass and put me to sleep. Granddaddy Purple, which that's going to be a parent lineage of Purple Urkel and Big Bud. Aromas and taste profile that you can expect out of indicas mostly include piney smells, musky smells, tastes, earthy, diesely, and skunky. To lastly note about indicas, some noticeable medicinal uses for this are pain management, appetite stimulation, nausea, and insomnia. Now that we've made it through the she part of our shit list, and this T stands for good old terpenes, the thing in the cannabis plant that gives us the scent and taste profiles and also gives us and is the main contributing factor of the medicinal benefits that we get from the plant. So to give you a little tidbit about terpenes in a more specific manner, these are naturally occurring essential oils found in a good majority of plants in general, not just cannabis, and even bugs have terpenes within them. Go figure. The way in which terpenes work to help give its effects within the cannabis plant is that it works, they work, hand in hand with the cannabinoids themselves. Now, as I mentioned a little earlier in the episode, there are four, I'm more so going to cover the four most commonly found terpenes within the cannabis plant, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of an honorable mention at the end just because it's my specific terpene favorite, but it's not included in the most commonly found ones, but I feel like it does the most for me and what I need most of the time, so I try to find strains now that have this specific terpene in it, which you will learn about shortly. But first, let's get to that myrcene. Yes, myrcene is going to be the first terpene that we're going to talk about. This is the most commonly seen terpene found in cannabis. It is known for having an herbaceous, quote-unquote, spicy and earthy / musky profile. The most noticeable / potential benefits are anti-inflammatory, pain management, and insomnia. Couple strains to take notice when looking for this would be Chemdog and Agent Orange. And as an extra little bonus about myrcene, you can find this in the mango fruit, and this is also what sometimes gives strains its sweet taste. Next down the line of the most commonly found terpenes, and this would probably be at least in my top three personally, and that is going to be caryophyllene. Caryophyllene in general is the second most commonly seen terpene within the cannabis plant. And this terpene is known for its woodsy, peppery, spicy profile, sometimes clove-like. With this, the most noticeable / potential benefits are as well anti-inflammatory and antiseptic. Others include anxiety and depression. Some strains that you can expect to see caryophyllene high in is going to be Gorilla Glue number 4, and Pineapple Express, which is actually one I cover fairly early in the series. And, if you've never had Pineapple Express, I highly recommend trying to find it. For me personally, it really starts off as a big head buzz cerebral kicker, but ultimately just puts me out for the count. So I kind of hold on to that for when I really need sleepy times. But yeah, let's continue on down, trotting to number 3, most commonly found terpene, and that is going to be pinene. Pinene is probably going to be the easiest terpene to figure out, just in my stupid opinion. It has an aroma profile of, you guessed it, pine. The taste profile on pinene comes in with a woodsy, again, piney, and sometimes musky taste. With this terpene, the most noticeable or potential benefits are going to include as well anti-inflammatory. That's going to be something you see overall in a lot of terpenes, to be honest. Let's see if I can say this one correctly. Bronchodilator. So essentially it helps to open the ways, which is kind of interesting given that in the general sense of smoking something like cannabis, just like smoking, cigarettes, although cannabis, as we all know, is a lot more healthier for you than cigarettes will ever be, it still technically acts as an inflammatory agent. So I don't know. It's kind of like a double-edged sword almost, it seems, but I digress. One other big thing to note about this is that it helps well with anxiety, and even it could help with possible short-term memory impairment. So go find yourself some pinene, you forgetful stoners.
That's the power of Pine Sol, baby.
Last little bit here to note about the pinene terpene is that it has also been seen to potentially help in fighting cancer cells. So kind of going hand in hand with some cannabinoids over there. Maybe combine the two, find a way to concentrate them together. Bada bing, bada boom. You got one saucy recipe for killing those fucking cancer cells. Fuck cancer. Cancer sucks. And I apologize to anybody who's ever been affected by it because it's run in my family a lot. So fuck cancer. Yeah, but some carrying on, my wayward son, some examples that include pinene as one of their main terpenes would be Blue Dream, which who doesn't love some classic Blue Dream from time to time, and a heavy hitter of an Indica, God's Gift. And with that finishing up of pinene, we come to our fourth most commonly found terpene, and that one is going to be limonene. And just like pinene, and again, just in my dumb opinion, this one's pretty much easy to pinpoint and gives away what its aroma or taste profile is going to be. Can you take a guess? You guessed it right, toasters and moshers. It's going to have a citrusy, fruity, sweet profile, which is kind of more up my alley. I really like those citrusy strains, and again, you're going to find those a lot within sativas, so big reason why sativas are my jam. With limonene, the most noticeable and potential benefits you can expect from this terpene include an elevated mood, so for depression and stress relief, antifungal / bacterial, so again, kind of going hand in hand, with some of those cannabinoids. Maybe you can make another saucy stew and help us out. Come on, doctors, what is that 10 years of medical school for? And even continuing on that note, researchers have found that limonene might have potential tumor-fighting properties. So again, we got more cancer fighters over here. Come on. Fuck cancer.
You know what I'm talking about, you fucking cockroach.
And lastly about this limonene, some strain examples that have a higher content of this limonene as their main terpene would be Tahoe OG and a little bit of Dosey-Do. And now that we wrapped up our top 4 there, stoners and toasters, I'm going to give you my honorable mention, and that is going to be terpenylene. That's right, terpenylene. And I find it to not just be fun to say terpenylene, but it has a very, very orangey, citrusy taste and scent to it. And as far as the citrusy stuff, that's the one that does it for me. I love the orangey. So strains like Jack Herrera have terpenylene in, which actually I've been smoking here and there throughout this podcast episode. So if you can get your hands on some Jack Herrera, I highly suggest that. But yeah, terpenylene is good for treating migraines. It's good for being creative to help with stress and anxiety relief. That's why I try to find these strains that are high in it, because personally myself, that's kind of what I deal with from almost a day-to-day basis, having mental illness. I'm sure a lot of you out there understand, and you get the drift. But yeah, so this is a big one for me, and that's why I chose to even smoke it before this podcast, because it really got me in the mood got me ready to do the thing and get these creative juices flowing. Anywho, guys, gals, and potential non-binary, non-gender conforming people who might be out there listening, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for the shit episode of the Riffs and Spliffs podcast. I almost said Cannabis Education. You see this shit? I'm messing up my own fucking podcast, people. But I give a big thank you to everybody whose ears this has been falling upon. Anybody who has listened to the first 2 episodes at this point. I am super excited for the content that is going to be coming at this point forward. A lot of good jams, a lot of good info on strains, and hopefully it's going to do what I'm hoping it does and give you guys a little bit of entertainment and information to, have a better experience with cannabis and to enjoy some sick fucking music while you're sitting there smoking those spliffs, you know what I'm saying? That is going to do it for this episode. As always, if you want to check the show notes in the description down below, I will have all my social medias linked where you can keep up with all the happenings on this Riffs and Spliffs podcast. Thank you again to all you listeners, and as always, stay toasty, my friends.